Today, I'm joined by Eric Voogt, a trial attorney who took a leap from practicing law to founding Proof, a legal technology platform that has scaled to over 300 employees and 65 million in revenue in just 8 short years. Eric is a rare breed who deeply understands the traditional grind of managing law firm while simultaneously building a technology designed to disrupt it. We are diving into the journey from uninformed optimism to industry leader, the massive 700 billion justice gap in the US, and the hard marketing lessons he learned while scaling Proof. We'll also get into why your law firm refusal to be efficient is actually a ticking time bomb for your profitability. Eric, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thanks, Alex. It's wonderful to be here.
Now, Eric, one of the first questions I want to address, when we were talking before, you said that you noticed quite early on that about 80% of legal needs in the US actually go unserved. What was the moment when you realized that, and what did you decide to do about it?
Yeah, that's great. We have an access to justice problem in the U.S., and I'm talking about civil, right? I'm not talking about criminal. We've got our own issues over there. But in the civil world, I noticed it in my own practice in managing a law firm. I would get inquiries from potential clients on a regular basis. I like to say 24 out of 25 times I'd listen to their case, understand the facts, understand the potential damages, and then have to turn that case down because they could not afford our hourly rates or they weren't damaged enough to justify a contingency fee at that level. And that's a huge problem. These are just causes that go unheard. The courthouse doors are essentially closed for these folks, and it's a giant problem. I think last I looked, we spend as Americans and American businesses $350 billion on legal services, right? What a lawyer provides to these businesses and individuals. And that's only 15 to 20% of the need. So what I say to lawyers out there in law firms, let's adopt some technology so we can go attack those green fields that are those other 80%. It's 350 billion of served legal needs. What is it for the other 80% or 85%? Is it another 350 billion? Is it more than that? It's a lot of money out there that is not being serviced today.
Presumably, some of your colleagues in the industry also seen the same, experienced the same, but they didn't do what you did with starting the company to try to solve it. What do you think drove you personally to take that leap and try to put Proof together in the early days?
Yeah, I know exactly what happened, right? I mean, I know exactly the moment. Look, I was frustrated with the lack of our ability to address those cases that weren't getting heard in court, right? I was very frustrated, and obviously one of the answers, is technology, right? So that's where my brain was 8 years ago. I had a case. This is specifically what led me to start Proof. I had a case for a long-time client of the firm. I had probably done 10, 12 pieces of litigation for this. It was a real estate consultancy, right? And they got into disputes with their customers, and we represented them on those. One particular dispute came to me, and I took the case on for this longtime client of ours. And we served the documents, which under the Constitution you have to do. You have to hand them to the defendants so they know the importance of responding or their rights are going to be curtailed. We did that, or at least we thought we did that. I had an affidavit from the process server that my paralegal hired to serve the defendants that said that they did it correctly under Colorado law. So we proceeded, when they didn't answer the complaint, to get a default judgment. It was the court entered a default judgment against these real estate developers for about $250,000. We went to collect on that. They had owned some property that we went to attach and collect on and file judgment liens. All of a sudden, a opposing counsel enters their appearance in the case and says, "Hey, you didn't serve this right. You didn't serve this per the rules and the Constitution." So, and I thought, well, it says here in this affidavit that we did. So I was like to my client, I was like, "Hey, we're going to go fight this." The judge ordered us to appear for a trial just on whether we delivered these documents correctly. Process server did it correctly. We did a day and a morning, I think, of trial with witnesses and documentary evidence presented to the judge just on whether we started the case correctly. At the end of this thing, the judge, which is unusual, is going to rule from the bench, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's seen enough. He holds up the affidavit of service, right? Which says that we did it correctly. He says, this is all I got. Otherwise, I've got this contradictory testimony. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're just going to throw this out. Well, you got, he said, I remember, Mr. Vogt, you're going to have to start over. My
Mm-hmm.
client fired me, didn't pay the 15 grand he owed me for taking that part of the case to trial, and never hired my law firm again. I don't think I've ever spoken to him since. Right. So from that moment, I was like, we can't just have this handwritten piece of evidence. We have to have more proof. We want it. And that has been our
Mm-hmm.
goal. We have been working with technology and process and building a company to eliminate any of those issues surrounding initiating the case, thereby making the litigation process at least more efficient at the beginning and helping lawyers not have to face what I faced. And so that was the beginning. I was like, we got to do something about this. And that's when I started building the technology that has carried proof for those 8 years.
It's, great story because it illustrates that it comes from the personal problem that you were trying to solve as opposed to just trying to create a new legal technology or something that's not tested. It's something that you've seen firsthand. It impacted the relationship with the client. It impacted the justice process, and you started it. Now, Eric, with the rise of technology, it's easier than ever to vibe code, to create the prototypes, but it also can be a trap, right? We talk about uninformed optimism of the first time founders that might see that need, they see the pain they want to solve, but then the reality can be a little bit different. When in those earlier days, when you started Proof, what were some of the surprises or maybe shocks to you that you had to solve and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, look, it started from our MVP, right? Our minimal viable product, right? We created the software. I thought it was awesome, right? But you have blinders on as a founder, right? Always about your product market fit. And that's why you create an MVP first. You don't spend too much money before you take it out to market. Before I even took it out to market, I took to our own paralegals. And I remember sitting in our conference room, my law firm's conference room. I was like, hey, what do you think about it? You've tried to use it. What do you think? She's like, took a deep breath and she's like, and this is hard to say to the managing partner of the law firm who just built this technology. She says, I'd rather have my eye poked out with a stick than use this.
Descriptive feedback.
Right? And I was like, what do I do with this? That's not ambiguous. She doesn't like it. So, deep breath. And this is, the number one thing for a founder, right? Is you have to have perseverance, right? You're going to get your butt knocked into the dirt over and over again. You're going to be in tears. You're going to be frustrated, but you got to get up the next day and you got to keep after it. So and then you iterate on your technology, right? What's wrong with it? What can we do better?
Mm-hmm.
Then the next big hiccup was we built this and I started to talk to some law firm colleagues of mine, lawyer colleagues. I was like, hey, try this out. And they're like, oh, yeah, what? Okay, Eric, well, here's my paralegal. And paralegal's like, this looks pretty cool. And they started to try it. And then I realized we don't have any process servers on the other end of the technology to deliver these documents, right? The tech started working. So then I'm out knocking on doors trying to deliver documents myself with our mobile
Mm-hmm.
app and working with the technology. So those were a couple of the first couple hurdles, and I think it was a challenge for about 3 or 4 years because we didn't have a lot of money, and I was doing a lot of the work on my own or with a small group of us. And it really started to turn where, and this kind of goes to the growth switch nature of your podcast, when I was like, okay, we've shown that we can sell. We've shown that founder led sales are positive. I was like, we got to raise some money. And I got to hire some real experts to execute on this. I know we have product market fit, we have revenue momentum, but we need some people that know what the heck they're doing. And Eric doesn't really know. Eric's just a lawyer
Mm-hmm.
that has built this good piece of technology. And that was a good turning point. hired really good people, and I started to recognize that I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't do this even with a small group of really hardworking people. And we turned into a company that focused on execution as opposed to innovation and just running ourselves through a wall day in, day out.
It's been quite a journey to learn those things and test them. Do you think in the early days when you said that you started putting it together and you had harsh feedback from a colleague, do you think proof could have happened if you weren't in the position you were in the firm? Do you think that today, if a more junior member of the team has an idea and they want to run with it, but they're not successful out of the gate, they would get enough approval from their seniors to actually see the idea through until it has the MVP and get some traction?
Yeah, I think the world is more open for innovation today. And when I say the world, I'm talking about the legal
Hmm.
profession. So I think there's more opportunity to innovate in the legal profession today. It started with the pandemic, right? That taught lawyers who were allergic to technology that, hey, we can run our firms on Zoom. Hey, we can do
Hmm.
hearings on Zoom. We don't always have to show up in court. We don't need bricks and mortar and the kind of things that we had been doing previously. Then there was the Great Resignation, right, where there was more lawyer jobs open
Hmm.
than lawyers that were looking for those jobs. Same with paralegals. And what does that push people to want to do? And that's to adopt technology, right? And because they can't hire. And then
Hmm.
finally, AI is here to stay. And one of the top professions that AI is going to affect is the practice of law, whether you're a transactional attorney or a trial attorney, litigator like me.
Hmm.
And so when you ask that question, I think about sort of pre-pandemic when I would go out and look for money and they said, come back and when you got 20, 30,000 in monthly revenue, right? We
Hmm.
do 65 million a year now, right? And now everybody's fallen over themselves to invest in legal tech. So it would have been hard back then, right? But today, with the tools, with the development tools that you have, and specifically in legal,
Hmm.
all the change there and all the appetite and all the money flowing into legal for innovation, I think the answer has changed. And my answer
Hmm.
would be different today. I think that you have more opportunity, more chances for success in legal today than you did in 2018 when we started this thing. The world was very different.
I think we've seen how pandemic completely transformed the industry because it forced somebody who previously was allergic to the change to adopt. I'm curious if we use what we've seen in the aftermath of pandemic as a guess of what could happen with AI. Do you also have an example where interest in new technology overshot its practical ability when somebody was too invested into trying a new piece of technology that actually made matters more complicated than they had to be?
Yeah, I absolutely. At first, I'll start to try to answer that question with I think something we say in the technology business. We consistently underestimate or we consistently overestimate the impact of technology in the short term,
Hmm.
right? And we consistently underestimate the impact of technology in the long term. And so I'll start there. I do think there's been a rush to label your legal tech business as
Hmm.
an AI solution. And I think some of that is, over rotated for sure. I think that there's a danger of buying legal tech solutions when, Claude Cowork
Hmm.
can do the same thing in your business. And one of the things I wanted to say on this to your law firm owners and partners and paralegals and lawyers out there is that the best thing to do when you think about technology today is to try to create a culture where experimentation is valued, right? And where that's trusted and you're willing to experiment. And I think, it doesn't really matter what LLM or
Hmm.
agent you work with. I like Claude. I think, Claude Cowork is, this AI assistant that's going to sit kind of co-pilot with you and work on your actual database and work
Hmm.
on your files with you is a tremendous new development in the last couple of months. But open that experimentation up, and I think that you will find that you can make your law practice more efficient and more profitable. You don't have to,
Hmm.
buy the most fancy new thing that's labeled AI, but start somewhere. Start somewhere and value that experimentation from the top to the bottom of your organization.
You're probably also in the unique position because you didn't left law entirely to focus on the technology. You both practice law and you build the technology, so you see exactly where the line between practicality and efficiency and hype lies.
Yeah.
What you said about the culture as well, do you maybe have one or two examples when somebody brought an idea that was interesting because you created the culture of innovation, and then later that maybe became a feature of your product or changed the way you
Yeah.
do things?
Yeah, I think I have. I'll talk about, maybe I talk about, Proof's culture of experimentation,
Hmm.
because that's what I know best today. And then maybe your listeners can gather, ways to apply those in their organization. We have contests
Hmm.
for, the best new AI use idea, right?
Hmm.
And we've really pushed that in our technology team. Right. And now the key is to push that across the team, right? Is it RevOps? Is it finance? Is it, HR? Is it hiring? Is it operations, where we can use AI to help our team be more efficient and help our balance sheet as a whole? So we started out our AI journey at Proof, right? What we do is we take documents from the lawyer and we get them
Hmm.
in the right hands, whether it's the court, the witness, or the defendant. And we use AI because there's specific rules in legal, right?
Hmm.
Can All our clients have to do is upload the documents, and then AI reads those documents and pulls out all the information they need, and we need to get the job done and create the affidavit of service at the end of the day that's going to get filed in court. When our affidavit specialist sees that affidavit and there's something wrong with it, they correct it, and that tells our AI
Hmm.
how to get smarter at the front end.
Hmm.
That was the beginning, right? But through this culture of experimentation with AI, we've learned that AI can help us with our S&B market, right? The folks
Hmm.
that are the smaller law firms, right? That come on and they use us once for maybe a delivery that's out of state to where their current provider is. And we have an AI bot that re-engages them with some product-led growth work
Hmm.
and tells them about new features and engages them in a conversation and teaches them about our product and our way of doing business, where it's more difficult for us because of the cost of humans to teach a solo or a three lawyer law firm how to use our
Right.
product. So that AI agent, we call her Maya, has been
Hmm.
super effective with some of our smaller law firms to make them more efficient in the use of our product. And now we're turning that sort of idea into AI help for our operations, right? We do
Hmm.
80,000 deliveries a month now across the country under all types of different rules. And we have a lot of data that AI can help us analyze and help our operators and our process servers understand when a delivery is going to go off track and get to fixing how to get it back on track sooner. So
Hmm.
those latter two have come through that open culture of experimentation, right? Where the
Hmm.
first one was just, that's what we thought we needed. And so that was more top down from, the executive team down. And
Right.
now that we have more of a culture of experimentation, we're seeing folks on the front lines come up with good ideas about how to
Hmm.
use AI in our business. And I think that'll be the most powerful way AI gets, because just like me, when I started the business, I started because I knew what the problem was. The
Hmm.
people in your business doing the hard work day in, day out are the ones that know where the problems are, where the difficulties are, where the time sucks are, where the challenges are to quality. And if they have the education and the tools and the permission, you're going to get the best ideas out of them.
Mm. Another perspective on this, I feel like if you constantly have conscious conversations about the opportunities to improve, obviously you find those new ideas, and you have a competition and you have something that applies. Another one is just documenting your work. And this is for me where marketing comes in, because if you have more people involved in talking about what are the issues and challenges, it could be that something becomes, as they say, a feature, not a bug in their work. If they have a colleague hearing about this case, whether it's, case study material or just an article, together collectively, law firms, by involving more into marketing process, they can actually spot those opportunities easier. I feel like that's just part of being more active with it. But if you are to advise a law firm that doesn't have those initiatives up and running yet, what the 90-day plan would look like for
Mm-hmm.
them to start having those conversations, think about how they can collect feedback and maybe prototype something and then implement it.
Yeah, no, I think in Europe, in Great Britain, in Australia, that have similar legal systems, 100% or 98% of those law firms have case management systems, right? They've bought them from Clio or MyCase or Filevine or Leap in Australia. And in the US, I think it's only 50% now. And there's some pretty amazing products out there. And so I would start there. I would start with getting a case management system that, at least in litigation, that allows the whole team to share the same information, including with
Mm-hmm.
your clients. Communication, when you're emailing and making phone calls, that is, or trying to find a document, that is, that's the first place to start. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't address your question, but it's we should be thinking about that as lawyers and law firm managers. That case management is really, one of the early steps that you're going to take. Then, from a process perspective, when you're thinking about becoming more efficient or delivering better quality results for your clients via technology, the first thing to do is, and I hate to use the word audit, but you need to talk to
Mm-hmm.
your folks. You need to understand, and as a litigator, that's what I know best. You understand the litigation process, and then talk to your folks about what takes the most time,
Mm-hmm.
where they're having the most difficulty, and then focus on those areas. You can get so lost, right, in all the products and all the noise. But if you focus on the area that your folks are telling you, or you believe that is the most inefficient in your business, then go after that, right? Start there. Then learn what products are available in that area and then test those. Everybody's going to give you a free trial. Do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't enter into a long-term contract. Lawyers should know that, right? And then one thing that lawyers don't do a good job with is setting a KPI, right? A key
Mm-hmm.
performance indicator on that product, that piece of technology. We might buy technology, but we don't go back and evaluate that technology. So that is key. What are you trying to change with this technology? And then measure that and
Mm-hmm.
iterate. And if you're not getting what you need out of it via that KPI, then change,
Right.
but don't let it sit. And it's important to come up with your measurement, how you're going to measure it, when you're going to measure it. It's not a vanity metric, it's a real thing that moves your business forward. Do that before you buy the piece of technology. So you buy the
Mm-hmm.
right technology and then you measure the impact of that technology. Something that I never did as a lawyer. I
Mm-hmm.
bought it and I was just like, okay, there it is. And we never continued to iterate through measurement and try and,
It all starts with infrastructure, like you said, having that case management system,
I
talking to
think
the people, and then being open to change. It sounds like a lot of the way how you've built over the last 8 years proof has been, of course, influenced by understanding the legal world. Are there any lessons from running proof that you then took back into the legal practice, and even maybe in terms of the KPIs, they were influenced by having now that technology experience?
Yeah, I can't think of any direct examples that I've used over in the law firm business. My law firm is not a big law firm, but What I would say to law firm owners is that you got to start doing something now because AI is here and the opportunity is here, right? There's a lot of down market opportunity. There's also technology gives you an advantage to challenge law firms for work that's more lucrative above moving up market. So I would say I would hire. I would start with that. I would hire people that
Hmm.
have not necessarily education and background in technology, but a curiosity for it, right? And I would make that part of every single one of your interviews. And I think maybe you start there because that's a good way to get that knowledge into your firm. That is certainly what we do at Proof. So
Hmm.
having a more rigorous hiring process as a law firm is with an eye to experience or at least a curiosity in technology would be a good lesson that I learned from starting and growing Proof to where it is today.
Certainly. In terms of the growth that Proof experienced, you mentioned that you had founder-led sales
Yeah.
initially. Is that something that came naturally to you, or you just, this is what I have to do, and then you basically were focused on that because that was the only way at the time?
Well, I'd say a couple things. I think it is natural for me as a trial attorney and a litigator. You're a storyteller, right?
Hmm.
And I don't want to, I mean, you have to be bound by the facts, right? And the law.
Right.
But putting together a compelling story is very, very helpful. So I had that natural ability, right? And I also had the experience as a law firm owner, right? So I knew how to tell the war stories that got me in the door and establish that credibility. But I also built Proof from day one, so I knew the product market fit. I knew it very, very well. um, I think those things, having confidence from those things, gave me a leg up in sales, right?
Hmm.
But a lot of it early on was product market fit, right? It kind of sold
Hmm.
itself. You just had to get in front of people, and I was good at doing that. When you mature as an organization, founder-led sales and relying on founder-led sales can be a real detriment, right? You have to find a go-to-market motion from marketing,
Hmm.
digital marketing to awareness marketing to, being in events to selling to the right law firms that had the right CAC to LTV, right? You can't
Hmm.
just go after the wrong ones. That doesn't make any sense, right? So, in putting all that together was, the next step. And I can sell to anybody in the legal world, right? But I
Hmm.
can't create that go-to-market motion, that efficient I'll tell you, Alex, somebody said, I think we need to hire a marketer. And I was like, I thought that's what I did. I didn't know the difference between sales and marketing. I had to
Right.
Google that. So that tells you have to realize your shortcomings. And if you're going to ever scale like we do, you better get out of the way as a founder and hire the right people, or this is not going to happen. And that was hard for me. I've always been in charge. You do your cases, your small team, and it was hard for me to let go, but you gotta let go or it isn't going
Hmm.
to grow. I hope that answered your question.
And then I think you said two crucial things there. One is that you need to realize when you cannot be a key person risk anymore, you need to get out of the way. But the second one that I want to explore is that you need to hire the right partners.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier on, were you able to find somebody who was a good fit and helped you with success from the first attempt? Did you go through trial and error, trying to define, understanding what marketing is, what a good marketing partner looks
Yeah,
like?
it wasn't easy, right? And I guess what I'll say is the right people at an early stage are not the same people almost always for the next stage, and then when you get to a much bigger company.
Hmm.
Okay. And that's one of the hardest things as a founder, especially a loyal person who's gone to battle with, your group as an early stage company, and then as an early stage growth company, and then a growth company, and then more of
Hmm.
a, more of a established company with a lot of revenue. And those were the hardest things, right? Is to make those changes. But I say to all founders, you have to make those changes, because most of the time the people that got you to this point aren't the folks that get you to the next point. And I was forced to have my own self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really hard for me. And this happened, it was about 2 years, 18 months ago. And I recognized that I have a lot to give to this company still from a strategic perspective, but the day-to-day operations perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I needed to recognize that I needed to be up leveled as CEO. And so I was fortunate enough and in the position to do that hard look, and brought on an amazing CEO that took over about 10 months ago for me. And now I'm exec chair, and that has propelled the business forward. So I had to, I say you have to look at your exec team at every stage, and sometimes you have to make changes. I realized that 300 employees, 65 million, I had too many guesses every day, Alex. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
need somebody in here that has been a couple levels above us to take us to those levels. And so I put, I focused that spotlight on myself and realized that it was time for me to move into a strategic role as opposed to just a day-to-day operations role. And that was
Mm.
hard, but it's something that was essential for us to continue our growth.
I think it was probably absolutely necessary. And something that you said earlier as well, you need to audit your actions, what you do, what your limits are. And that should be a standard process, because that's how you can, uncover the next stage of the growth.
Yeah.
Being, again, you're in a unique position between the technology and law practice. Where do you think most law firms have those points that you described, when you have basically 0 to 1 as one team, and then you have one responsibility, then you have, let's say, 1 to 10 type of growth, and then 10 and beyond?
Mm-hmm.
With your knowledge of how law firms operate, where do you think those maybe milestones are when they should be mindful that now's the time to audit, reflect, and maybe change?
Yeah, you start with, if you're a managing partner of a small firm, like we had a dozen lawyers. When I would look at, if you want to get to the next level, you have to come to an arrangement with your firm that you're not going to be solely compensated as managing partner on the
Mm-hmm.
amount of billable hours you bring in, the amount of clients you bring in. You have to have a way to get yourself outside of the business, right? And work on the
Mm-hmm.
business as opposed to in the business, right? It's what we all say as owners of businesses, right? And I don't think law firms make that room for their managing partner to work on the business. And there's too much drive to focus on your billable hours, because that's how you get paid in these very siloed law firms. So I think the first thing you got to do if you want to grow is find a way to get outside of that billable hour that you work on every single day. Then I would say maybe the next stage for growth is find somebody that can run the office for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who has some technological expertise and is a great manager, right? And that is going to help you grow. Then invest in technology, and don't just pocket, the efficiency gains, right? That you get. Don't just pocket the extra money that is at the end of the month, right? When the CPA comes and says, this is how much more money you've got
Mm-hmm.
to distribute to your partners. Save some of that and reinvest it in growth, reinvest in technology, invested into another market or another area of the practice of. So I think those are some. I don't know where it breaks down, like when you're at 10 million, then you do X. But those are
Mm-hmm.
some ways to really focus on growth as a law firm owner.
And when we were talking earlier as well, we were discussing the efficiency that investing back into the technology can bring. I think, tell me if you agree with this, but it's a decision that maybe around the culture or other aspects every firm needs to decide, because they could just be more efficient, more lean, and they could actually take the decisions they just want to be more profitable. Or if the company wants to expand, then they can reinvest that back into just being able to open up and service more clients that need access to justice, because that's what started your journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're going to have to make that decision. And I think you also, there's one thing we haven't talked about here that technology gives you an advantage, right? It gives you a quality advantage.
Hmm.
It's not just putting more dollars in your pocket or, funding your growth. You can also look at it as just a quality enhancement, which will automatically, even without, a 10-point business plan, allow
Hmm.
you to grow. There are so many tools today that if you're trying the way we did it before, right? You get tens of thousands of documents in discovery in a case. You're trying to read them all and understand the case that way, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, a disservice to your staff, and a disservice to your client, right? There are great deposition tools. There are great discovery tools that allow you to take a better deposition with less preparation time. So
Hmm.
it's not just we put this in our pocket or do we use it to grow more quickly. It's also, we have an obligation to our clients to be the best attorneys possible. And technology, especially in a document intensive profession like the practice of law, can really help. You have to do it smartly, but it can really help you deliver a quality result in a much more efficient fashion for your clients.
One of my wishes for the industry, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but with the added efficiency that technology can provide, I wish that lawyers spend more time documenting their successes and their lessons, both as a marketing tool, but also to serve again when the clients can't access, whether it's access to justice or just trying to solve something because they actually don't need an attorney at that point. What's your take on that?
Yeah.
Where do you see maybe the trends going in the next couple
Yeah.
of years?
We as lawyers, we get caught up in the confidentiality, which we should. I mean, that's our ethical obligation. But there are ways to trumpet your success on social media or trumpet your success on your website or with your marketing agency that doesn't violate those rules. And look, in 2017, before I started this thing, I wasn't that person, right? I didn't do that, but there's absolutely a reason to do that, right? It's going to grow your business. It will help others in the profession understand what your success is and apply it to their own practices. You become a thought leader, which in and among itself is fun. It's exciting. And if you care about the practice of law, like I do and most lawyers do, it's sharing that information with your colleagues, even the folks that you do battle with on the other side. That is a wonderful way to give back. So, and
Mhm.
it does provide a lot of content for your marketing agency for sure. I have thoroughly enjoyed being a thought leader in the intersection of the practice of law and legal technology. And I would say to your listeners, your lawyer listeners, it's a heck of a way to feel good about what you do day in, day out, is create some of that content and engage with others out there. Find some time to do that, and you'll find your business grows and you'll get returns on that financially as well.
Certainly. Eric, looking at everything that you know today, what would be your advice to your younger self? And maybe what is the advice that you're giving yourself right now as a something top of the mind for the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to start with, and don't let me forget, I'll add a little personal piece to this that's kind of related to, well, it is the intersection of, personal and professional, right? And how to try to balance that. Because that's obviously very important. But I'll start with as a younger self, and I'll start with in the practice of law, right? I would have taken a more business-minded approach to the practice of
Mhm.
law, and I think we would have done better as attorneys, and we would have been better for our clients as well. And I talked a lot about how I would do that, working on the business as opposed to just in the business. Maybe you establish, like, have you ever heard the EOS
Mhm.
process? A way to run your business regularly with check-ins with your key personnel, and driving the business forward in a way that most law firms don't, but all businesses do. I think I would like to take some of the lessons I learned from my experience in the corporate world, that is the startup and corporate world, that is
Mhm.
proof, and applied that to my law firm, because we didn't do hardly any of that. So
Mhm.
that's one lesson that I would love to go back and do. I think the other lesson that I wish I did as a younger professional is that I wish I would have focused more on, being in the moment when I wasn't
Mhm.
working, and even being in the moment when I was working, right? We have, driven people are always, the brain is always churning, even when you're with your family or your friends or doing something that's not in your professional world. And I've learned um, how to be more present in the second half of my career, how to use
Mhm.
meditation, how to use exercise. And there's this book that I don't read a lot of business books, and people are always like, how do you don't do a lot of that stuff. I didn't go to business school, and they always wonder about that. But one book that I take with me all the time and is a book called Die with Zero. And I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's an easy read and the concepts are simple, but it's good to remember that sort of our account gets full
Mhm.
by the types of relationships we have, the depth of those relationships, and our experiments. And we don't take with us the dollars we accumulate in our bank account. What real life is those relationships and those experiences. And if you're too wrapped up in how much money you got, and you don't spend any of that money in relationships and experiences, you're not going to live that most fulfilled life. So I wish that I would had come to some of those revelations earlier on in my
Mhm.
life, um, than I have. And so that'd be a lesson to more of my personal self.
Fair enough. Excellent. Eric, where can our audience learn more about proof and learn more about your work as well?
That's very easy. Certainly send me an invitation on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to communicate with you. Or you can email me at eric@proofserve.com. And, if you have specific questions, I can't answer them about proof. I can get you the right folks. So you can always check us out at proofserve.com. That's the kind of stuff we do. But hit me up any of those ways. I'm very generous with my time. I love talking to lawyers and paralegals and other legal tech company founders. I will always find time for you. So, any of those ways, let me know. I'd be happy to chat.
Perfect. Eric, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.